The state of Ohio is home to two different blue Giga coasters located at Cedar Fair Parks. Cedar Point's Millennium Force, which was built by Intamin in 2000, and Kings Island's Orion, which was built by B&M in 2020. In this video, we will compare these massive two coasters using criteria such as prime ride time, pacing, intensity, and their trains and restraints. Some of these will be weighted differently based on their importance to the ride experience. At the end, we will add up all the scores and give my final thoughts on which one I enjoyed more personally, not just based on the numbers. Our first category is the first drop. Now these two coasters actually both have a drop of exactly 300 feet, despite Millennium Force standing 310 feet tall and Orion being 287 feet tall. However, Orion has a steeper angle of descent at 85 degrees, whereas Millennium Force reaches a max vertical angle of 80 degrees. They both give what I would actually call borderline ejector airtime in the back row, and because of the massive height, it is very sustained. Both of these coasters deserve huge scores on this, but I'm going to give the slight edge to Millennium Force. I prefer the lakeside setting for the first drop, and the trains are much longer, so the airtime feels stronger despite the shallower angle. For this category, Millennium Force gets a 9.9 out of 10, and Orion gets a 9.7 out of 10. Our next category is prime ride time. This one is pretty objective and straightforward. Prime ride time is measured as the time from when the train begins to pick up speed off the lift to when it enters the brake run. Here, Millennium Force easily takes the win as it boasts 65 seconds of prime ride time as compared to 51 seconds for Orion. We will award Millennium Force 9.5 points and give Orion a proportional score of 7.5. Now we move to the pacing of these two coasters. Now, there is an objective way to measure the pacing of a coaster by just taking its average speed throughout the layout, but to me, pacing is more than that. I think of pacing as a coaster's sense of speed throughout its layout, as well as how fast it moves from element to element. I think this is another category where Millennium Force really thrives. It stays low to the ground for much of its layout, and it just feels like the train is ripping through the foliage of Cedar Point. Orion doesn't really have the same sense of speed because most of its elements are high off the ground, and it doesn't have any prolonged low to the ground sections. However, beginning with the entry to the turnaround at the far end of the layout, Orion does have a nice rapid-fire succession of a few elements before its helix, so it picks up some points there. So for this category, Millennium Force will receive a 9.2 and Orion will pick up 8 points out of 10. Our next category is airtime. This category combines both the strength and amount of airtime on these two coasters. This is where Orion definitely has an advantage. Over half of its elements are airtime focused, and its two traditional airtime hills both deliver strong and sustained airtime, in addition to its massive wave turn, which does deliver some sideways airtime, and its twisted airtime hill at the end of the layout, which gives some more strong airtime. On the other hand, Millennium Force only has two huge camelbacks, which deliver very sustained floater airtime, but it is weak. Its layout does also have a speed hill at the end, giving borderline ejector airtime, but it is a very brief moment. Orion will take this category by a score of 8.6 to 6.3 out of 10. The fifth category we are rating is thrill factor. Now, as an enthusiast, I never really get scared on roller coasters, but I think there is something to be said for the thrill that comes from ascending a 300-foot lift hill and the wind just whipping past you at 90 miles per hour, or for the thrill that huge elements high off the ground can give. Both of these coasters have a strong thrill factor in my opinion thanks to their huge height, but I'm actually going to give the edge to Orion here. While I think Millennium Force's setting next to the lake does help it a bit here, Orion's massive wave turn takes you nearly 200 feet off the ground and leaves you sideways, hanging by your restraint. For that reason, I'm going to give Orion the win here, by a score of 9.4 to 9.2 out of 10. Now we move to the intensity of these two coasters. Neither of these are really known for being intense, but Millennium Force has by far the most intense element between these two coasters, which is the overbanked turn after the first drop. This turnaround absolutely glues you to the back of your seat for at least 5 seconds, and it is usually a gray out moment for me when I ride Millennium Force. Orion has no elements that even come close to that moment, but it does have a large helix as well, which delivers some strong positive Gs. But the Intamin Giga will take this category by a score of 7.9 to 7.1. Layout is really what makes a coaster great in my opinion. A coaster can have all of the stats and look great on paper, but if the layout is lackluster, it will not have the same level of ride experience as other elite coasters. In this case, both coasters have solid layouts. However, I think Orion has a much more diverse layout. It has a wide array of elements and forces, with each individual element building off the last. On the other hand, Millennium Force's layout is a lot more simple and only has a couple of different elements. It still works really well, and I love the way it showcases its speed, but Orion's ride experience is so much more dynamic and clearly more modern. For that reason, Orion gets a score of 8.5 and Millennium Force gets a 7.4 out of 10. The next category is the restraints and trains. This might not be something some people care about, but for me, this can make a huge impact on the ride experience. Millennium Force sports Intamin's amazing 2-across 18-row mega coaster trains with their legendary T-bars, which is possibly the most minimalistic restraint you will ever find on a large steel coaster. Orion also has some awesome trains and restraints with B&M's Hyper trains, which are 4 across and 8 rows. These trains have clamshell restraints with retractable seatbelts, which are also fairly minimalistic and stay out of your way during the layout and allow you to easily experience airtime. However, I have found on rare occasions the seatbelt will get in the way and contact your waist before you hit the clamshell restraint on an airtime moment. I will give Millennium Force the win here because I do prefer the T-bars and 2-across seating, but there really is no loser here. Millennium Force will score a perfect 8 out of 8 and Orion will score a 7.7 out of 8. Our second to last category is theming. Both of these coasters don't have any theming at all during the layout, but Orion actually has theming in the queue and the station. The station has a small amount of theming that does just enough to add to the experience. Right before you get to the stairs that lead to the station of Orion, you pass through a show building which features a pre-show playing on a monitor, as well as various props and little Easter eggs themed to spaceflight as well as Cedar Fair roller coasters. Plus, the shade buildings in the queue are stylized to fit the space theme. Millennium Force does have the iconic station music which will win it a point or two, but Orion takes the cake here by a score of 2.9 out of 5 to 1.5 out of 5. Finally, we will rate the operations of these two Giga coasters. Honestly, both have great crews who avoid stapling and hustle trains out of the station. I would say these are probably two of the best crews I've ever seen in all the parks I've been to and coasters I've ridden. And it does make sense that Cedar Point and Kings Island would staff arguably their signature coasters with their top-notch employees. However, I'm going to give Orion a slight edge here for one reason, which is row requests. I've never had a problem on Orion with requesting any row, as they are always accommodating and do their best to make it work. However, on Millennium Force, I have had instances where they simply do not let me wait for the front or back row. I understand they are not obligated to do so, and I never argue or cajole any employee if they tell me no, but it is something for me that really adds a boost to the overall experience. So Orion takes a perfect 5 out of 5 here, and Millennium Force scores a 4 out of 5. We are now at the point in this coaster battle where we tally up the scores of every category, and Orion will take the extremely close win over Millennium Force by a score of 74.4 to 72.9. This does actually line up with my somewhat controversial personal opinion that Orion is better. But there's no doubt that these are both two outstanding coasters, and it's basically impossible to have a bad ride on either of them. If you have any thoughts on our ratings for any of the categories, let us know down in the comments below. Also, if you ever have any video ideas for us, tell us about those too. That will do it for this video, and as always, thanks for watching.